Today, we're diving into something truly chilling, a reality that completely shook the world. We're going to look at how this perfect storm of extreme loneliness, the total anonymity of the early internet, and some incredibly twisted human desires came together to create an unprecedented legal and moral nightmare. Now, I have to warn you right out of the gate, what we're about to explore, it isn't some horror movie plot. It's not fiction. It is a fully documented reality. We're going to examine exactly how that very thin layer of civilized society can sometimes just violently rupture, pushing human boundaries, the law, and morality to places they were literally never meant to go. Looking for a well-built 18 to 30-year-old to be slaughtered and then consumed? Yeah, you heard that right. That is not a line from a Hollywood slasher. It's the actual, real-life advertisement posted on a dark forum called the Cannibal Cafe back in 2001. And this single, chilling post is what launched our entire analysis today. You see, this wasn't written as a joke. It wasn't some edgelord provocation. It was a cold, direct invitation to death. And it asked a terrifying question. Would you like to die and then be eaten? But the kicker? Not by force, but completely of your own free will. So let's move into our first main section, the monster next door, focusing on the Rotenburg mansion, and look at the man who actually hit post on that ad. The terrifying reality of Armin Maiwes is a story of absolute duality. I mean, to the outside world, this guy was your classic, polite, helpful neighbor. He smiled at folks on the street, he dutifully cared for his elderly mother, went to work on time, basically maintained a flawlessly normal exterior. But behind the heavy doors of his massive, totally silent mansion, he was literally building a human slaughterhouse. After his mom passed away, that huge house basically became a graveyard. Up on the second floor, he put together what he called an experimental room. And we're talking fully equipped with butcher knives, camera stands, the whole shebang, everything you'd need to dismantle a human body. So the polite guy you saw outside was, internally, a monster spending hours in the dark, spinning these incredibly gruesome fantasies. Now, you are probably wondering who on earth actually answers a dark web ad like that. Well, enter Bernd Brandes. Sitting hundreds of miles away in Berlin, Brandes was a highly successful engineer. The guy had money, he had status, but beneath all that, he harbored this bizarre, all-consuming desire to be entirely destroyed, to be consumed by another person. For weeks, Maiwes and Brandes engaged in these chat logs that are so cold and chilling, it's honestly like reading two businessmen draft a contract for murder. Brandes ultimately convinced Maiwes that yes, he was 100% ready to become his meal. Let's actually trace the events of March 9, 2001. Because looking at this timeline shows you the sheer calculated preparation Brandes took to willingly abandon the world. That morning, he drafts his final will and mails his house keys to his lawyer. Done. By the afternoon, he's sitting on a train from Berlin to Rotenburg, just staring out the window at a world he knows for a fact he is leaving forever. And when he gets to the station that evening, Maiwes is there waiting for him. They reportedly actually smiled at each other when they met, like two old buddies finally reuniting. Maiwes just casually loaded him into his car, and they drove back to the silent mansion. Okay, so what actually went down inside that experimental room is just, it's almost too grim to even wrap your head around. They didn't treat this like a crime at all. They treated it like a macabre celebration where the guest literally was the main course. First, Maiwes sets up a video camera to record the entire night. Second, they down heavy amounts of alcohol and painkillers to try and dull the pain that Brandes is about to experience. And third, with Brandes giving his explicit, repeated consent, the physical mutilation begins. They were living out their absolute darkest fantasies in real time. And just to give you an idea of how bad this was, when police eventually found that footage, seasoned veteran officers reportedly couldn't sleep for weeks. By 2 a.m., this horrifying agreement reaches its absolute climax. Brandes is barely conscious at this point from the sheer blood loss. Maiwes takes him to an upstairs room, reportedly kisses him goodbye, and then fatally stabs him in the throat with a butcher's knife. And what follows is just deeply methodical. Maiwes systematically dismantles the remains, stripping bone from flesh, and packs the meat into his freezer, arranging it all as casually as if he'd just done a Sunday grocery run. But the aftermath? Honestly, this is where the psychological dread really sets in, because it was completely disguised as chilling normalcy. For the next 10 months, Maiwes just goes about his life. He goes to the office daily, meets up with friends, literally shakes hands with people who have absolutely no idea what he's been up to. At home, he's storing Brandes' remains in empty pizza boxes in his freezer. And every single evening, he sets the table, lights a candle, pours a glass of really fine wine, and consumes a small portion of his victim while rewatching the murder tape. He felt like Brandes was now a literal part of his existence.
It became such a routine for him that he actually hopped back online and started posting new ads to hunt for victim number 2.
Which brings us to the second half of our explainer: murder or consent, the legal thriller. Because once Myways was finally caught hunting for those new victims, this whole thing pivots from a true crime nightmare into one of the most wild legal battles in modern history. We really have to stop and ask ourselves this profound question: can the law forgive a consensual murder? Because this exact dilemma left the German judiciary completely sweating. They were staring down the barrel of an unprecedented legal loophole that absolutely nobody had ever anticipated. Let's break down this absolute courtroom drama, because the shift in legal strategy here is fascinating. In the first trial in 2004, the tension in that room was thick. Myways' defense throws a total curveball. They argue, hey, this wasn't murder, it was killing on request. Under German law at the time, if someone is begging to die and you assist them, the sentence is way lower. And because Brandes explicitly answered the ad and consented on tape, the court initially bought it. But flash forward to the 2006 retrial, and the prosecution changes the game entirely. They argue no way this was not a mercy killing. This was a calculated, brutal murder driven purely by Myways' own sexual gratification and mental depravity. Going back to that 2004 ruling for a second, an 8-year sentence. Just 8 years. That sparked absolute nationwide outrage. People were literally pouring into the streets to protest. And you can understand why, right? The public was terrified by what this meant. If a guy can butcher and eat a human being over the course of a year and get 8 years in a cell, what is stopping literally anyone from just forcing a signature on a piece of paper that proves, quote, consent to justify outright slaughter? Thankfully, during that 2006 retrial, the court firmly, completely shut down that terrifying loophole. The new judges rewatched that grim video footage, and they honed in on the sheer pleasure Myways was getting out of it. They completely overturned the 8-year sentence, and they delivered this incredibly powerful statement: human dignity cannot be ended by any consent. Meaning, the law simply does not allow you to sign away your life just to fulfill someone else's sickening fantasy. Myways was declared a dangerous offender and sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. So, bringing us to the present day, Armin Myways remains exactly where he belongs, firmly behind bars. But in just this completely bizarre twist of irony, he has reportedly become a vegetarian in prison. He apparently spends his days just quietly tending to the plants in the prison gardens. You really can't make this stuff up. As we wrap up this explainer, we're left with a pretty chilling reality. That huge, empty mansion in Rotenburg is still standing today. The locals are terrified to even look up at the window where a monster once sat in the blue glow of his computer monitor, casually chatting with his prey. This entire case forces us to reckon with the fact that right behind the bright, civilized facade of our everyday society, these impossibly dark corners exist, and it leaves us with one final, deeply unsettling thought to chew on. Are the most dangerous monsters hiding out in the wild, or are they living right behind the closed doors of our polite, quiet neighborhoods where no screams ever escape? Thanks so much for joining me today, and I hope this deep dive gave you an unforgettable look at the absolute extremes of human nature.